Well, the bridge had been repeated the largest issue in West Seattle over the years. The Chamber of Commerce was very strong here in determining kind of legislative positioning. Every year it was the top legislative objective of the Chamber. This West Seattle Merchants Association, the West Seattle Herald, the West Seattle Advertiser, a whole bunch of people. It was always at the top of their lists. So you really couldn't be in West Seattle and be, very easily not deal with the bridge somehow. And the fact that, I don't want to go into this too heavily because Charlie may go into it, but the Royer administration did have a plan for kind of a smaller bridge. As I recall, it was a $27 million low-level bridge. And that did not set well with the community leadership in West Seattle. I'm sure the administration took a lot of flack for that. And it was that and a couple of other things, including some housing issues and other things in the city, that sort of drove this group of people to really call for secession.
Tom, where were you the night the ship hit the span?
My comments are much more personal than historic. The day before the ship hit the span, I was in a conference with this man next to me. I was in a conference with this man closer than what?
You have to eat the mic.
Okay. I was in a conference with this man next to me, and we had settled on agreement that the firm that I worked for was going to design some new concrete approach structures to the existing bascule bridges. We hadn't signed the contract yet. We were going to do that on Monday. Well, Saturday, the ship hit the span. Sunday, I got a call from my boss, Tom Kane. Get to the office as soon as you can and plan on staying all day. Okay. The plan then was we had 3 firms in the team that I was supposed to lead, and it was going to be a nice job. It was going to be maybe 8 or 10 people working on the job for 6 months. So they decided they would call Parsons Brinkerhoff in New York, who was one of the most renowned movable bridge experts in the world, and asked them if they'd like to join our team. And the plan was to change the contract that we were going to have with the city just a little bit, from doing approaches to a new structure to all the options we should look at in replacing what's going on, okay? We went in, my boss and a couple of the other principals went in to visit with Bruce here and some of his compatriots, and says, we'd like to make a little change. We'd like to do a study for you. We've got the team together. We've got experts from New York. The guy had flown in that day. And we'd like to get a little quick contract for the same amount of money, and we'll just get going tomorrow. Well, it took us a week. 1 week after the ship hit the span, my life changed. From having 8 or 10 people working for me, at its peak I had 120 employees in 13 different companies in 10 different offices focused on your bridge. And we hit the ground running, and we've been running ever since it was done.
Where were you the night?
Well, I really wanted to just talk a bit about Jeanette Williams. Jeanette Williams, which you probably know, has passed on. But she was adamant that the bridge options should be looked at, and she looked at them and went to work with one thing in mind, that she was interested in a high-level bridge. None of these just over the top of the water ideas, but a high-level bridge. And over time and a fair amount of risk, she fashioned deals that brought in additional money from the Port of Seattle, King County, and the City of Seattle. By mid-1980, and and into 1981, the high-level bridge took shape, and that became the thing that was really close to her heart. She saw that the water that was going under the bridge was being clogged with various types of boats and rigs going up and down the channel, and it was just very slow, and she wanted to make sure that there was good ability there, good mobility there, and she knew that there was going to be a low-level bridge, but it's that high-level thing. She's the one that pushed that thing, and that became the thing to do. So there it is.
Bruce,
Yeah.
you were moonlighting as a Coast Guard Reserve duty officer that night, weren't you?
Oh yes.
So you were one of the first people on the scene. And what I understand is you were on a patrol boat that was assigned to floodlight the bridge to see the damage. You saw it
Yeah.
in the middle of the night. What did you see?
Well, it's a little hard to remember that, but
It's okay if you can't remember, that's fine. You can pass it along to Tom.
okay. I think I'll do that.
Great. Thank you. Well, I don't know where I was that night. God knows it was a weekend night. What are you thinking of? But I was on the staff of Jeanette Williams. She was the chair of the City Council's Transportation Committee. And of course, when we came to work on Monday morning, she got to work immediately. As Bruce said, she had no doubt that it was going to be a high-level bridge. No rebuild, no mid-level bridge or anything like that. It was going to be high level. And she said, basically, this is our chance to get it. A lot of people have tried and they failed. And she went to work calling in all of her political chits, I guess you could say. She pulled every string, honestly. And she flew back and forth between Seattle and Washington, D.C. many, many times, talking to people from the state delegations, particularly Warren Magnuson, to get the funding that was needed, to cobble the funding together that was needed for the high-level West Seattle Bridge. Never any doubt at all, but there was a lot of naysaying. And there was quite a bit of debate, rebuild or replace or do something halfway in between. And it really took a toll on her because, as you know, as you may know, Jeanette was in her 70s. Flying frequently can cause health problems. She got blood clots. She was in the hospital for a while. She didn't want anyone to know about that. She had to be treated for the blood clots, and her health was fragile. And I think in part it was because of the frequent flying that she felt that she had to do to get the funding confirmed. It was an amazing time because it was a very controversial subject. Some people wanted it, some people didn't. It reminds me a lot of the replacement options that we have for the Alaska Way Viaduct. What are the options? And people didn't want, we couldn't afford it, or it was too risky, and those are the types of concerns that had been expressed at that time. My uncle lived on 59th Avenue Southwest. I didn't. I lived on Queen Anne at the time. And he had seen people fail or try and fail. He'd seen people being indicted for corruption. And he said to me, that bridge will never be built. And I said, yes, it will. Because Jeanette is not corruptible. She knows Maggie, and she's going to get the money to do it.
Being on the commission, we had great plans and visions for the upper Duwamish River. And we were going to build container terminals up there. We never gave a thought to these mega ships that are being built today, these big floating bathtubs that carry 16,000 to 20,000 containers. And we were going to run container ships up there. We had a steel terminal up there. And every week, somebody was hitting the battens underneath that bridge structure, and we were all kind of holding our breath. And sure enough, finally the good captain, I don't know what he was drinking that night, but did us all a favor. And next thing I knew, I was being led around the playground by Dick Ford. Now, a lot of you don't understand the importance that Dick Ford played in that. He was never really an out front guy, but he's the guy that really developed the strategy, worked with Jeanette Williams, and put Merle Adlam, who was a West Seattle Port Commissioner, out in front. Merle took all the credit, but it was actually Dick Ford that really put it together and tied it into I-90, all the infrastructure we had. If you go down West Marginal Way, one of the finest industrial roads in the country, was all put together and as one package. And so I'll never forget, one night I was at work. I worked as a longshoreman. I worked nights and I was a port commissioner in the daytime. And a ship hit right after the bridge was finished. The ship hit the bridge. It was supposed to be high enough that no ship would hit it. And Shelby Scase jumped all over it. He just really, really enjoyed himself. But evidently the ship had gone up there and it was carrying clinkers for one of the cement plants. And when they came down, they were very high in the water. It was a high tide, and they had the booms flying above the mast with the superstructure. Anyway, they were straight up instead of being at an angle, and they scraped the bottom of the bridge. So we all had egg on our face, and Shelby Scase never let us forget it. I have a lot of memories of that bridge, and some of the steel ships were notorious for hitting the bulkheads on that lower section, trying to go through there, especially if the tide's going out. It was very difficult for the tugboats to get between the bridge abutments and the vessel. They couldn't. They'd have to work their way around, and it was always a gamble trying to get through there. But I could tell stories forever about trying to develop that upper section of the river. And Magnuson and Adlam used to get together and drink on occasion, and they always had this dream about what they were going to do with once they built the bridge, that they were going to run a canal all the way up the Duwamish and connect it to the Columbia River. And they were going to use atomic warheads to blow this canal. And it's a story you won't hear very often, but that's honest to God's truth. And that's where Merle Adlam and I kind of parted our ways. I'll pass this on before I get in trouble.
Well, let's see. I was Senator Magnuson's last, the position is now called Chief of Staff. It used to be called merely Administrative Assistant. But I was the last person to hold that job before the 1980 election, which he lost to Slade Gordon. And I actually worked at the city council, like Tom, and can attest to many meetings, making the rounds of the port and the county and other jurisdictions looking for money for one plan or another to fix this bridge. And it was a perennial and not solvable, at least notwithstanding the best efforts of many people for many years. Of course, almost every one of those schemes involved the idea that the federal government should provide a lot of money to the solution. And the only trouble with that was that there was no reason for that. And so we were always in the position of having to say, you know, gosh, it would be great, and we'll certainly look for an opportunity, but we actually don't have a problem. We don't have a program. There's no federal program. It's not a feature of any transportation legislation that's on the books. So it was as frustrating for us as it was for people out here looking for a solution. That weekend, and I remember this very clearly because Senator Magnuson and I were both going back to Washington the morning after the ship hit the span. And this was not, and at that point, the senator did not travel by himself. A staff member or Mrs. Magnuson or both went with him. And so I think I was the only available option. So I took that assignment myself that morning, and the travel back and forth was not something at his age at that time that he relished, and it always put him in a very bad mood. He was usually quite grumpy about it, so I was particularly not looking forward to it. They had an apartment in the Olympic Hotel where they stayed while they were in town. So I went down there, and we had a car, and I went up to retrieve him, and always giving lots of time because I knew he wouldn't be ready, he wouldn't be dressed, he'd be grumpy, he'd be bitching about having to go back, and just generally. And I mean, this is, at that point, he had not yet become President pro tem of the Senate, but he was the second most senior member of the Senate, a very senior member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, a very experienced and powerful man. So I arrived at the apartment, and Mrs. Magnuson opened the door, and I hear him in the living room kind of singing to himself. And I'm thinking, what is this? And so I look at her, and she rolls her eyes. And so I go in there, and he's got the newspapers spread out, and he's dressed and ready to go. And I said, well, I see, Senator, you saw that the West Seattle Bridge has been hit by a ship, and it's stuck open. And I'm thinking, God, this is going to put even more pressure on us for a problem that we couldn't solve. And by the way, one thing that one quickly learned when you had worked for Senator Magnuson for quite a while was how to imitate him. So I will favor you with a little imitation here. He stopped singing. He looked at me like, as he commonly did with his staff people, "You dope," and he did that a lot. He cleared his throat, coughed, and so on. You know what this means? So, no, Senator, I'm thinking just more trouble, more asks. We can't. He said, we can fix this now. It's an obstruction to navigation. And off we went. And that is literally a quote. Very promptly after we arrived in Washington the next morning, of course, we had a very large staff and lots of people, Appropriations Committee staff, personal staff, and we communicated early with them that we needed to start scouring for this circumstance and situation. And by the time he got into the office, we had found the Emergency Bridge Replacement Fund. And the Emergency Bridge Replacement Fund was required by law to replenish itself perpetually in the amount of precisely $100 million, which at the time was a very large amount of money. So we decided at that moment that we were going to take that, and I think Bob Royer and I will tell you how that unfolded.
Let me do just a little bit of background first, a little bit of political background. And the people here in the group who have worked with me will not believe any of this because it has to do with my fiscal responsibility. or lack thereof, as they recall. But when I was running for mayor in 1977, I obviously heard about the West Seattle Bridge. I knew the issue pretty well. I knew, as Jerry said, that there was no rhyme or reason for the federal government to find money and give it to us because the bridge was working pretty well and it was not a strategic asset. So we didn't have any money. And then the corruption that Bob Royer described drained the bank account before that. So we just didn't have the money. And so I was running for mayor against 13 other candidates, some very good candidates, including Phyllis Lamphere, 3 other members of the city council, and a guy named Paul Schell, who I thought was really smart. And I was a newcomer. So I just told the truth in West Seattle. I told people we didn't have the money, and I couldn't promise the bridge. I was the only one of the 14 candidates who didn't say I'd build the bridge. So I said, there's another reason. West Seattle is this incredibly tight community, like the rest of Seattle at that time really was. It was a single-family neighborhood type community. I said, we don't have the zoning in place. I was charged with rezoning the entire city at the time. Wes Ullman left me with that little task. So we were zoned for 6,000 plus people, and we were already starting to lose single-family neighborhoods. And I ran as a candidate who would protect the single-family neighborhoods, try to keep families in the city, which we haven't done very well at. So I said, if you build this freeway over to West Seattle, you know, we're going to lose those little affordable houses, and it's going to accelerate the gentrification of that neighborhood, and the character will go away. So I carried West Seattle in the primary, being the only one to say I couldn't build a bridge. So that wasn't exactly fiscal responsibility, that was political know-how, I think. But I really did want to build the high-level bridge, and Jeanette and I had many, many discussions about how we might pull that off. I also wanted to build a beautiful bridge, and we couldn't. It's a good bridge, it's a workmanlike bridge, maybe it's a West Seattle kind of bridge, but it functions fine. I wanted a really beautiful bridge, and we did look at suspension bridges. We looked at a kind of Golden Gate of the Northwest and that sort of stuff, way beyond our reach. And the port was after me to support the high-level bridge, which ultimately I did. Jeanette and others were very hard on this. I'm really proud of the way we all worked together, because I was a newcomer. I ran against 4 members of the city council. So my welcome to City Hall was cool in some quarters. But I'll tell you where I was when the bridge hit the span, and how, when the ship hit the span, and how, what another blow it was to my ego. So I'm in bed at home at 2:30, 3 o'clock, something like that in the morning.
Having just arrived.
Yes. Thank you, Ben. So the story unfolds like this. The dispatcher at City Hall, when the boat hit the bridge, the dispatcher at the police department called up the mayor and he said, "Mayor, a ship has just run into the West Seattle Bridge and it's frozen in the upright position. What'll we do?" The mayor, who in this case happens to be Wes Ullman, the former mayor, says, "Call the expletive deleted new mayor." So I've been mayor for 6 months and they hadn't changed the name on the... So if you think the bridge took a blow that night, I did. But anyway, I got to issue my first military order when the dispatcher